Trucker Dump, episode 187. In today's show, California's AB5 just won't go away. I don't know why. Getting paid by the mile is coming under fire. Truckers, drugs, and drug testing is always a hot topic. And I'll tell you where the worst traffic in the world and the U.S. is. The answer just might surprise you. Also, how likely is the U.S. going to be ready for electric trucks by 2045? I'll tell you about a new type of eco-friendly fuel too. And we'll discuss ways to avoid low clearance accidents. And for some good news, there's at least one source that says the worst of this inflation mess is behind us. All that and more news. Plus, we'll hear from a new listener in the feedback segment, and I'll introduce you to Cici, who you'll be hearing from in quite a few upcoming episodes. More details on that later on. Alright, let's get started.
Welcome to Trucker Dump, where you'll get one driver's insights and sometimes humorous views of truck driving and the trucking industry, and pretty much anything else he feels like dumping on you. This podcast is brought to you by AboutTruckDriving.com, resources to help you understand the world of truck driving through the use of stories and a pathetic attempt at humor.
Hello, fellow trucker dumpers. How's the world been treating you? Been caught in any snow lately? I have. Just the other night up in Wisconsin, it was a mess, especially in a tag axle truck like I have. You know, my front axle is drive and my rear is just a dead axle back there. So I don't know what it is about those things, but when you put those in reverse, I can actually spin my tires in reverse on dry pavement. So when I realized that, I knew I was in trouble come winter. And sure enough, dispatcher asked me to back in a dock. I gave one attempt and was like, can't move. What's the point? I just dropped it out there in the yard and told the yard guy, hey, that's on you. Sorry, I can't do it. I was lucky to actually get out from underneath my trailer. That's how bad these axles are. Yowza. So anyway, I hope you have escaped the mess, or at least most of the mess, and are doing well. So for those new to the show, or for you weirdos who just like hearing me say this every single week, my name is Todd McCann. I am a 25-year truck driver. About 10 of those were spent co-driving, team driving with the evil overlord, who is my wife and ex-co-driver. The rest of that's been solo. All of it has been dry van, pretty much company driver, never been owner-operator, never had a desire to be, know very little about it. So don't look to me for that kind of information. But what I can give you is 2 trucking ebooks that I've written. One is called How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job, and the other is Trucking Life. Trucking Life includes a 9.25-hour audiobook. You can find both of those books at abouttruckdriving.com. Right now, there's a 50% deal on those, so you can get both books for $9.99. Or if you just want one of them by themselves, I guess you can be dumb and go to Amazon or Apple iBooks or wherever you go for your ebooks and pay $9.99 full price. Your choice. So guess what? Yes, I know this is going to be a shock to you, but I am getting started late yet again. This time it is 3:28 in the PM on a Friday afternoon. I usually release this podcast on Saturday, or I try anyway. Boy, busy week again. I try to get it done early. I do. I try to just do a little bit each day, but the beginning of this week has just been hectic, and now I'm just going to have to cut myself short a little bit of sleep to get the podcast out on time. I know I've been scolded by people for doing that. Driver Dave, I heard you. I got your email. We'll read it next episode. But, yeah, it's just one of those days again. And, I was explaining the podcast to the guys that I work with, and, we talk on the phone at night a lot. And, I was saying how much editing I went into it, I do to it, and how long it takes me to do it. And one of my coworkers, Jerry, said, wouldn't it just be easier if you just did it right the first time? And, well, you can see the kind of smart alecks I'm working with and why I fit in so perfectly over here. Well, having said that, I am going to get right on with this episode and just get to it because, man, well, thankfully, I think it's going to be a fairly short show. But, how many times have I said that and that didn't come true? But before we get to the news, I want to issue a correction. I said in the last podcast, one of the stories we were talking about was driver trainers. And well, I thought we were talking about driver trainers, but we're actually talking about how the FMCSA struck down an exemption request. One company wanted to have their drivers not have to have a full 2 years to be a driver instructor. And actually, I said driver trainer, and I didn't mean that. I meant to say driving instructors, and that is the law. The new law says that driving instructors have to have at least 2 years of experience, not driver trainers. There is a difference. My understanding is that an instructor is actually part of a trucking school or part of the trucking training program at a company, but the trainer is not necessarily the instructor. I know that sounds vague and weird, and I may have to do some verification on this, but like my understanding is if you're actually getting, you're actually don't have your license yet, that is your instructor. But if you've already got your license and now you're just going with a new company and you're with a trainer, or your first company and you're with a trainer, but you already have your CDL, that trainer does not have to have 2 years of experience. That's my understanding. If I'm wrong about that, please write in and let me know, truckerdump@gmail.com. Also, we got a couple of fun little things going on right now that I'm hoping you will participate in. It will make the show even more fun. Both of these things originated in the Trucker Dump Slack group. This first one comes from Matt McKellar, who goes by the name Mountain Matt over there. And he wrote in and said, well, I've officially had my CDL for a year now. Along the way, I've been compiling some laws of trucking. Feel free to add to it. And as an example, he writes, Matt's Law. Within a half mile of me deciding to get over to that lane on the right that appeared, said lane will magically become an exit-only lane, and I'll need to come right back into the lane I just left if the four-wheelers will let me. Yeah, that's what we're looking at. As an example, I put in mine, which is obviously called Todd's Law. Within 1 to 2 miles of the exit ramp you need to take, you will inevitably catch up to a vehicle going under the speed limit. Yet they're just fast enough that you'll be the jerk if you try to pass them and get back over before the exit ramp. Seems to happen every time I come up on an exit ramp. So we've already got a bunch of submissions in the Trucker Dump Slack group. If you're in that group, add them right in there. It's in the trucking channel, and I'll read these off on a future episode. If you're not a member of the Trucker Dump group, you can join that by emailing me at truckerdump@gmail.com. Or another way to do it is if you're on Facebook, just head over to the Facebook group. I'll have a link in the show notes to both of these and, the Trucker Dump Facebook group, and you can add it in there. There is a post I put in there and you can just add your submission right there. We've only got one in there so far, so please feel free. I don't know why the Slack group is more active than the Trucker Dump Facebook group, but, well, that could be my own fault because I'm more active in Slack. That's probably a catch-22 thing. If I was more active in Facebook than I am, I could probably get more participation from you. But, well, that's the way it is. I'll do my best. I swear I try. And the other one is, like I said, also originated in the Trucker Dump Slack group. And this one comes from Zachary Smacher. Am I saying that right, Zach? I can't remember. I interviewed you twice on the podcast, and I still can't say your name right. He just calls himself Trucker Smack. But he wrote, I'm curious, how many of us drive barefoot? I'm assuming with socks, but bare feet as well. If you do, why? Pros and cons? I'm considering giving it a try for a week or so as my feet are taking a pounding being in boots 24/7. So what are your thoughts on footwear? What do you wear while you're driving your truck? We've already got about 15 responses over there in the Trucker Dump Slack group. And again, I've put this in the Trucker Dump Facebook group as a post. So go add your thoughts in there. And again, we will read these on a future episode. So with that, let's get on with the news before I fall asleep on the microphone. All right, let's start out by giving you a quick update on the AB5 debacle out in California. This story just will not go away. Don't know what it is. OverdriveOnline.com. California Trucking Association again seeks injunction to block AB5. So the AB5 thing, if you're new to the show, I'll repeat it again briefly, is where California is trying to say that independent contractors in the state of California are not technically independent contractors because they don't meet the criteria and that they need to become employees. So the state of California went to enact this, and there was lawsuits filed against it, and it went to a court, and the court put an injunction on it for now and said, hey, let's figure this out before we just jump into this new law and, ruin a bunch of truckers' lives. And then eventually that got overturned and they went ahead and implemented AB5. Well, now we're back to another injunction request, and this is coming from the California Trucking Association, and also OIDA has already done this before too. That OIDA being the Owner Operator Independent Driver Association. So this time around, the California Trucking Association is saying that the state never articulated how a motor carrier can possibly satisfy the law, primarily the B prong of the now codified ABC test for independent contractor status, which requires that a worker performs work outside the usual course of the hiring company's business. So that B prong is the one that's really hard to pass because it's hard to say, an independent contractor is doing the job that trucking company does. It's a trucking company that needs to move freight, using truckers, unlike, say, a tech company who is hiring an accountant. It's two different things. Or a tech company that's hiring a real estate agent as an independent contractor to find them more properties or whatever. So that B part is the hard part of it. But this is what the California Trucking Association is saying, that, hey, you never really defined how we can meet this, what we need to do to meet this B prong. So that's what they're filing for. And of course, OIDA and the CTA have also been saying all along that this law, the AB5 law, violates the Dormant Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And that's the one that just basically says you can't make silly or dumb or stupid, however you want to call it, laws that will interfere with interstate commerce. That's basically what that says. And they're saying this is going to majorly violate it, which I think it would, but anyway, we'll have to see if this makes it back in. It says a hearing is scheduled for May 1st. So maybe we won't hear anything on this until May 1st. No promises. Found this one on overdriveonline.com. Okay, let's hop over to landline.media. Bills in 3 states call for speed limit changes. I believe I talked about this first one, Indiana, in the last episode, and how they're wanting to make all cars and trucks go the same speed limit. Right now there's a gap. Cars can go 70. Trucks over 26,000 pounds are limited to 65. So this article here doesn't say it, but I found another article that I don't have linked and I probably won't go look for because I'm tired and lazy. But the other one said that there is actually, this has been submitted to the Indiana legislators like 4 times and it keeps getting struck down. And the strange thing is that the people who are against it, I think they're called the Indiana Trucking Association, something like that. It's a group of Indiana truckers who is against raising the speed limit. And I don't understand that at all. But I guess they've got a lot of swing with the state government there, and it never even makes it to a vote. It never even gets heard. It just goes, it starts in a committee and it just dies. And I really don't understand that. But the article did say they had somebody that had a bit more influence this time around that was for this, and he is part of that committee or something, so it might actually go forward. We will see. Of course, all of us truckers, and including OIDA, really want to see the split speed limits taken out. We hate them. In a related bill in Indiana, they are proposing that some of the speed limits on certain U.S. highways could be raised. Specifically sections of US 24, US 25, and US 30. And they're saying those could be jumped up from 55 mile an hour all the way up to 70 mile an hour if they get this done. And that's for trucks and cars, of course, because they do want to go for no splits speed limits there. So that takes care of Indiana. Let's move on to South Carolina. They are submitting laws to try to help with the slow-moving vehicles that are out on the road. So right now, as you probably know, a lot of interstates post like a minimum speed limit. And South Carolina's is 45 mile an hour. Well, they would like to bump that up to 50 mile an hour. Okay, that'll help. I'm not exactly sure how much it's going to help, but I guess we'll see. They say this is going to cost about $200,000 to put up 230 new signs that would say 50 mile an hour instead of 45. Well, I guess we'll see where that one goes. And lastly, we've got West Virginia. So in 2019, a House resolution gave West Virginia's Department of Transportation the authority to increase the speed limit on interstate highways from 70 to 75. Now, honestly, I can't remember is West Virginia 75? Are there parts of it that have been bumped up to 75? I'm assuming there have, because there has now been a new bill introduced that would authorize 80 mile an hour speed limits on interstate highways and 4-lane limited access highways. At least parts of those limited access highways. It says they will have slower speeds when those kind of highways are going through city limits. So that'll be interesting. Like I say, I don't travel in West Virginia a lot, and my truck doesn't go nearly that fast, so I really don't pay attention to the speed limits that much. About the only way I hit those speed limits in West Virginia is going down a great big hill, which there are plenty of, to be fair. Now, here's a little factoid for you. Apparently, Maine is the only state east of the Mississippi River with speeds above 70 mile an hour. They have some rural interstates posted at 75 right now. So there you go. Hope they can win you a bar bet sometime. So we'll keep an eye on those for you, and if anything changes and we get some better speed limits, I'll let you know. Landline.media. All right, let's stick with Landline.media for this one. Pay by the mile system, a killer, Driver Compensation Committee told. Okay, so on January 18th, the National Academies of Sciences Transportation Research Board, they had a Driver Compensation Committee meeting, and this is all part of that infrastructure package that took place back in 2021. This was part of that they had to set up research to try to figure out what's wrong with the trucking industry, and this was part of it. So at this meeting, there was a gentleman named Tom Weekly of the OIDA Foundation, and he got to talk to them a lot about driver pay. And he says that compensation that pays by the mile is a killer, and that's a quote. He says compensation that pays by the mile will get you violations. Compensation that pays you by the mile is a problem that needs to be adjusted and worked with. And the reason he's saying that is he says that most of the rules and regulations aimed at improving safety to drivers are basically meant to cut back on your miles or the amount of time you can run those miles, which is true, right? And here's the part I love the most about what he said to these people. Now, he's sitting in front of a panel of, all of these big wigs. The Department of Labor was there. The FMCSA was there. That's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. All of these people were there listening to this and, talking about this driver compensation stuff. And Weekly said, he pointed out that it's pretty much a standard in the industry that you give shippers and receivers 2 hours to load or unload your truck. Everybody knows that's pretty standard, right? Well, looking right at the committee, he says, and I quote, "How many of you go to work for 2 hours before they start paying you?" End quote. Well, excellent point there, Mr. Weekly. Now, he went on to argue for the hourly pay method. In here, he provided an example of a Louisiana carrier who was running legal, but they were having a lot of crashes. And he says this company decided to change its pay structure and start paying by the hour instead of by the mile. Their goal, they said, was to create a job that was sustainable and that allowed a driver to have a family life. And supposedly their driver turnover rate went from 75% down to 17%. And if you know anything about the trucking industry, 17% is amazing. Quite honestly, 75% is pretty good too for the trucking industry. So anyway, I read lots of articles about this kind of information where they're really talking about, well, let me just tell you what FMCSA Administrator Robin Hutchinson said. She says, quote, "This is a critical study to determine the kind of work environment that will help drivers stay in the industry. This is about driver retention. This is about safety." So like I said, this is on everyone's radar, so we're just going to have to see how this goes. Now, I don't have a problem with the pay per mile, so to speak, in itself, because pay per mile incentivizes you to drive. It incentivizes you to get there quickly. It's like my job. It's first come, first serve. First person there gets the best load out. So it incentivizes me to move on. But if you're getting paid by the hour, are you really in that big of a hurry? No. And that's Weekly's point. You're slowing down, but you're also being less productive. So, I don't know. I mean, you got a lot of lazy drivers out here, right? I mean, would they take advantage of an hourly situation? And as I've said from the very beginning, talking about this hourly stuff, is my biggest concern is that, okay, hourly's great, but what are you paying per hour? Because I know what I can make right now per hour if I figure it up with my mileage pay. But I'm guessing if any company's going to do this, they're going to like lowball you and want to pay like $30 an hour or something like that. And that just ain't going to fly, and you aren't going to make as much money. And especially considering that whole, what is it? The Fair Labor Standards Act from way back in like 1918 or something, where it put truckers in with farmers and said you didn't have to pay them overtime for anything over 40. So there's that too. I mean, do you really want to run, unless they change that, do you really want to run 60 or 70 hours on the road at straight time pay? That doesn't seem right either. So they would have to fix that too, I would think. And as we pointed out before, most carriers are just going to adjust all of this so you don't make any more money, probably less if they can get away with it. You know, they're just going to figure out, okay, well, we typically run a driver 40 hours of regular time, and then there's like 20 hours to get them up to 60. So we'll figure in that overtime. We'll do all the math and we'll think, okay, we're getting them close. Well, okay, I guess if it's close, I'm okay with it. But my biggest fear is always, like I said, that they're just going to cut the rate on that hourly pay and you're going to end up getting paid less overall. I don't like that idea. Personally, I kind of like the idea of, just sticking with mileage, but just making it mandatory that these shippers have to pay from the second that you pull in there. I mean, if they tell you to be there at 2 p.m. and you're there at 2 p.m., you should start getting paid for that. I don't know why they expect truckers just to sit around and not get paid for stuff, but it's just standard practice now. And people are used to it, and they just, heck, I said a million times on this podcast, that's just trucking for you. Well, it's not just trucking. I have a union job now, and I don't sit around for nothing. I get paid for everything I do, even if it is just sitting around waiting on a load. Heck, I get paid if my truck breaks down, and from the second it breaks down, I call in and I start getting paid for that too. But I digress. I realize most of the trucking industry is not union, and therefore that's not the situation we have here. But anyway, I do understand that running pay per mile is going to make you go faster and possibly make you less safe. So interesting little study here. We'll see what comes of it. You can find all the details on this one at landline.media. Hey, you remember last year when a driver named Leland Schmidt Jr. was trying to get out of all of the hours of service regulations? He didn't want to run an e-log. He didn't want to run, by all the rules, and they denied him his request for that. Well, we've got another one here on CDLLife.com. Now, we talked about this Ronnie Brown in a recent episode, and he had asked for pretty much the same thing. And, well, surprise, surprise, the FMCSA rejected. They denied his application for this. Again, stating that common thing, quote, the exemption would not achieve a level of safety that is equivalent to or greater than the level that would be achieved absent such exemption. close quote. Now, again, I ask, how do they know that until they give the guy a chance to prove it? But apparently this had a lot of comments on it. There was about 1,200 comments. About half of those were drivers supporting this request. And, they were saying we shouldn't have to abide by rules. We shouldn't have to do e-logs and all that stuff. There was a lot of kind of neutral, and there was a lot of people who just said, hey, if you let this pass for one guy, it's going to open up a floodgate. And that is true. And that is one of the reasons why the FMCSA rejected this, is they know if one guy gets away with it, then lots of other people. I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, if one person gets this through and they say, yeah, you're a pretty good driver. You don't have to use the logs. You've never had a wreck or whatever. Well, anybody who's never had a wreck is going to immediately file for this thing so they don't have to run e-logs, right? I don't know. Maybe some people like running e-logs, but I think if you can get away with not running them, well, you probably wouldn't. So anyway, that's really all there is in this story. If you want to read more about it, you can check it out on cdllife.com. By the way, I still think there's a few more of these out there. I know there's a couple who submitted the same thing, so just expect those to be rejected too. If any of them passed, well, as Clark Griswold said, I wouldn't be any more surprised if I woke up with my head sewn to the carpet. Oh, I love Christmas Vacation. Such a great movie. Why is the carpet all wet, Todd? I don't know, Margot. Hey, here's another quick little story on cdllife.com. Stephen Gorman brought this one to my attention. Former FMCSA employee admits to extortion of trucking company. Oh, wow. So this was a Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration border investigator, and basically he was in charge for going around to trucking companies and auditing their logs and their safety records and all that stuff. And apparently he would demand $3,500 to not report violations once he found them. And apparently an undercover agent posing as a representative from the trucking company got him by, when he accepted $2,000 to not report these problems. Bummer. Man, I hope that money's worth it. I imagine he did it a whole lot more than just these couple of times, right? But he's facing up to 20 years in prison, so, well, I hope it was worth it. Dude, that's just dumb. Why can't people just be on the up and up? Well, I guess we now know why we got some of these trucking companies out there that trucks are falling apart and they're still on the road. Check this one out on cdllife.com. Well, there's not much to say about this next one except what the fudge. I do not understand this at all. Found this one on ttnews.com. That's Transport Topics. Title: Federal officials plan to add fentanyl to drug tests. What? How is that not a part of our current drug testing system? I mean, we test for marijuana, cocaine, alcohol, all that stuff, but not fentanyl, which is a major problem in this country right now. That is unfreaking believable. I don't even know where to go with this. If you want to read more about it, head right on over here to ttnews.com and try to figure it out, because it makes no freaking sense to me. Wow. Okay, well, marijuana and truckers has been in the news for quite a while, and there's been a lot of questions around it. We may finally have some answers. Maybe. Landline.media's got this one. Trucker's drug conviction raises questions about CDL holders and marijuana use. So basically what happened is this driver got pulled over in Iowa, and he was given a marijuana possession charge. Now, this driver had legally obtained the marijuana with his medical card in his home state of Missouri. Apparently, Iowa got him for a weight violation, but the officers noticed the smell of marijuana coming from the cab. And when they asked him about it, he produced 3 small blunts, and just said, hey, I've got a Missouri medical card for it. And he said he only had the amount of cannabis prescribed to him, so he figured he was good. Now, he was saying due to the nature of his job as an over-the-road trucker that he couldn't just leave the stuff at home. He had to carry it in his vehicle with him, which of course means crossing state lines and all that stuff. And He was saying that if he's not allowed to travel freely between states and, carry his legally attained medical marijuana, that would be a violation of his rights. His attorney argued, quote, the burden placed upon the defendant is to either choose a different occupation and potentially be out of a job, or to choose not to partake in medicine that was prescribed to him by a medical doctor. The defendant should not have to decide which is more important to him. He wishes to have both of these privileges when he is simply driving through a state, which is his constitutional right. End quote. Well, an Iowa court of law said differently. First off, they said he was not legal in that state because Iowa doesn't allow smoking of pot for marijuana for medical purposes. They only allow the use of like gummies and other forms. So again, I think this pretty well describes it right now. Even though he had it legally, it is still not legal to do this as a trucker. The FMCSA guidelines, that's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, it says, quote, a person is not physically qualified to drive a commercial motor vehicle if he or she uses any Schedule I controlled substance, including marijuana. So you can see where there'd be some confusion between the states, but for the FMCSA, it is cut and dry. So unless you want to probably lose your job and get stuck on that drug and alcohol clearinghouse and probably have to go through, well, you will have to go through some substance abuse programs, just don't bother, okay? Enough said. There's more information on this if you're interested, but it's probably not necessary. Just like weed. Landline.media. All right, electric trucks. Transport Topics, ttnews.com. Can heavy electric trucks be deployed industry-wide by 2045? Yep, that's the date everybody's kind of shooting for. I believe California was the first to aim at this, and maybe like 9 or 13, I don't remember. I think, well, one of those two states have kind of jumped on board with this and say, yeah, we're all in. All these trucks are going to be, well, all vehicles are going to be electric by 2045. Now, to be fair, a lot of cars are going that way, and it's going a lot faster than I thought it was going to, but yeah, maybe cars by 2045. But here is the problem. Just as we have always talked about, it's charging. Now, one thing you think about is, like, if you are a local carrier and you are a local driver and you need to park your truck, you can, probably park it at a terminal, do it overnight. But like a lot of these LTO companies, there's a city driver that drives it during the day. A road driver drives it at night. So it's never really down. So really it's only going to be those jobs that, work a regular day and then the truck sits for 10 or 12 hours so it can charge overnight. Now that may be doable in certain circumstances, especially local stuff. But, they're talking about all trucks, and that includes all heavy trucks going over the road. And that, they're saying, is just not going to fly. And that's mainly because drivers are going to have to coordinate their charging with their parking. And we already know there's not enough truck parking spaces in the United States. Everybody knows it. The government knows it. They're working to try to fix this problem, but we are a long way off from it. But I mean, think about it. Right now, if you run out of hours and you're can't get to a truck stop, even if you could find a spot with a charger, which again, that's not an issue right now, but in the future, say you can't get to a truck stop, and now you have to park on an exit ramp of a rest area or just a highway or whatever. No chargers out there, is there? I mean, what are they going to do? I don't see this happening by 2045. Now, that is a long way off, but we know we have to increase the grid. That we did that one article that talked about how one decent sized truck stop is going to be using about as much electricity as a small city. Yeah, when all those trucks are charging at night. So there is that to deal with too. Now, here's another thing I had not ever thought about, but time on the road. There is one individual in here who talks about that when you're dealing with electric trucks, you are spending about 20% longer on the road than you would with the diesel truck. And that's because, you can pull in, fuel up a diesel truck in, 10 minutes, maybe, If you're hurrying, you can do it in 10 minutes. If you got small tanks like me, I can whip in there and be out of there in less than 10 minutes, easy. But with these electric trucks, you're going to have to charge them. And, even with a fast charger, it's going to take longer than 10 minutes. So, like I said, they're estimating this is going to take about 20% longer than diesel trucks. So now you have to ask yourself, what about e-logs? Now we're up against the clock, and now we're doing charging too. Maybe there's a future where we see that there is a charging break, and maybe that extends your 14 hours or something like that. If it takes you an hour to charge, you can just log that all as on duty, or maybe if it's charging off duty or on duty, I don't know how they would do it, but maybe that would extend out your 14. Anyway, I don't see... Well, by the year 2045, we're going to have different rules probably anyway that are way more strict. But I don't know. In this case, it sounds like they're going to have to be less strict on those, so we have time to charge all these darn electric trucks. Interesting. Well, if you want to read all the details about this one, go over and check it out on transporttopics.ttnews.com. I just thought that 20% more on the road thing was something I had never heard before, and we've talked about electric trucks a lot on this podcast. So there you have it, to be continued, although I don't even know if I'll be doing the podcast next year, let alone 2045. You may have to figure that out some other way. I may not be around to tell you. Onward. All right, here's some new information for you. Well, it was for me anyway. I'd never heard this before. CDLLife.com. Company debuts world's first ammonia-powered big rig. Yes, ammonia. I had never heard of that before. So basically, this is a hydrogen truck. We've talked about hydrogen before, of course, in the past, but this is ammonia. This is a company called Amogy Incorporated. And they are saying that this is a zero-emission semi-truck. It is basically a hydrogen truck, but it has an onboard system to convert the ammonia into hydrogen. So you're not loading hydrogen directly on the truck and it's burning it. I don't know exactly what it's doing with it, but using it, consuming it. But this, you're actually loading ammonia. Now, the key to that is they say liquid ammonia has an energy density that's approximately 3 times greater than compressed hydrogen, and it requires significantly less energy, making it cost-effective to store and transport. So basically, if they were to put liquid ammonia or compressed hydrogen on the same vehicle, the liquid ammonia is going to go way farther than the straight hydrogen unit. Very interesting. This thing just got started up in 2020, so we will see how this goes. Very interesting here. There's a little video here on the website if you want to go check that out and see what that looks like. Looks like basically any truck with a slightly different fuel tank. Go check it out, cdllife.com. Pretty cool. Hey, not much to say about this next one, but freightwaves.com has the story. Outrider raises $73 million to scale autonomous distribution yard business. Okay, now we talked about Outrider before. That is the company that operates these yard trucks that can autonomously go hook up a trailer, put it in a door, unhook all the airlines and everything with a robotic arm. And then, when it's done, it can go back and pick it up and they can move it out to a specific spot. None of this is remote control by a human or anything. There are humans monitoring the whole situation, but these are just a bunch of trucks running around a yard, moving freight in and out of doors. Crazy. Well, they just got this influx of money, to grow their business and to expand out anymore. Of course, their biggest customer we mentioned is Georgia Pacific right now, and they said they have a bunch of other big Fortune 500 or Fortune 200 companies in their mix too. I still want to see a video of this robotic arm in action, but I still have not seen that. If anybody finds that, please send me the link to it. truckerdump@gmail.com. I'm very interested to see that. So anyway, like I said, not a whole lot to say about this. I just wanted to let you know that if you see one of these yard trucks driving around in the Georgia Pacific somewhere with no driver in it, don't be freaked out. Don't run and scream and dive for the ditch. Okay. Apparently these things work pretty well, or else they wouldn't be getting all this funding. Check this one out, freightwaves.com. The future is near. Gotta be honest, this commercial carrier journal is pissing me off. I like their stories, but they're just making me mad. ccjdigital.com is their website. And when you go there and you go to read a story, you get to read like 2 stories, and it makes you sign up for an account with an email. And I swear I've done that about 15 times, and they keep asking me to do it over and over, and it's pissing me off. Stop it, or I'm just going to quit using you. I believe CCJ is a Randall Riley company, which I believe also is overdriveonline.com. Now, Overdrive doesn't do that to me, so why are you doing this to me, Commercial Carrier Journal? Anyway, this one's called Low Clearance Technologies Help Fleets Avoid Costly Accidents. Now, of course, this technology is designed to keep, well, we won't have as many videos to watch online when it comes to truckers being stuck underneath low passes, right? They give an example here in New York State, which has some of the lowest bridges in the nation. 344 low bridge collisions occurred in 2021. In 2022, 67 bridge strikes occurred in New York City's boroughs alone. Wow. So anyway, they're highlighting different ways people are and companies are tackling this problem. For instance, they say Trucker Path uses, specs that you put in the app for like your height, your weight, your, all that stuff. And it will, provide you with bridges and low clearances when you get near them, or it's supposed to, as we all know. And the article points out here that these systems are not 100% accurate. Everybody knows if you use a GPS, it's not right all the time. And that's the same kind of thing we're dealing with here. So there's that. So there's other companies that are using some kind of like a sensor on the truck itself that can look out ahead and see a low clearance. Some of these will warn you via a mobile app. Some of them actually go as far as like slowing your truck down. So you can't actually, it'll slow it down before you even get to the bridge. Now, of course, that doesn't completely solve the problem because, once you're that close to the bridge, now you're going to have to figure out a way to turn around and back out. And that is a problem too. So all this is pretty interesting. There's more details in this article, ccjdigital.com, if you can get in there to actually read it, which you should be if it's the first time you go over there. But it mentions down here at the bottom that hopefully these technologies will one day get rid of the old bump and run procedure that drivers have been doing for years. Now, what they're talking about is you drive very, very slowly up to a bridge and you see if your trailer hits it or not. That's kind of brave, but I guess I've done that before, driven up to it and gotten out and saw that I was going to clear and I went underneath it. So if you've ever done that and you had a problem or actually bumped one of these things or actually hit one all out, please write in and tell us the story, truckerdump@gmail.com. In your own voice would be great if you can manage that. Record an audio comment right there in your phone. Voice memo app or whatever it's called in your phone and send it off to truckerdump@gmail.com. Okay, sticking with the annoying commercial carrier journal, this one is going to be super quick, but it's good news. Maybe. All indications say that the economy is crap and it's not going to get better anytime soon. But this article here says differently, and they are saying, well, the title of the article is Supply Chain Correction Helps Put the Worst of the Inflation Crisis Behind Us. I don't know what that chiming is. I cannot figure it out. If you hear that, sorry. Okay. So they're saying a lot of indications within the trucking industry and the way it's going. This is all very technical financial stuff that I don't understand. But if you are interested in this kind of stuff, go check it out. They're talking about shipping rates, prices of lumber, supply chain adjustments that they've done are making the economy improve. And This fellow in here says, and I quote, "It's clear that the worst of the inflation crisis is behind us. We expect it to continue to fall in the U.S., moving close to the target rate of 2% within a few months. The UK and Euro area will follow suit, but it might take longer for the price falls to gather momentum. And in the UK especially, the decline in inflation might be quite slow." End quote. But for this gentleman to say that the inflation rate is basically going to be back down to normal within a few months is, well, sounds like good news, but I hope he's right. I don't know if he is. That's the only person I've ever heard say that. But anyway, if you're into this financial stuff, go over here to ccjdigital.com and check it out. Well, we all know traffic sucks, right? It's one of the worst things about trucking. Well, this report over here on landline.media tells us where the worst traffic in the world is. This comes from a company called NREX, who has something called the Global Traffic Scorecard. It rates the worst traffic in cities around the world. Surprisingly enough, the United States does not have the worst. London has that prestigious honor, but not by much. They say that 156 hours are lost due to congestion in London. Number 2, where do you think that is? It's in the United States. LA? New York? Those are the 2 I would have guessed. Wrong. Chicago. 155 hours lost. Further down in the article, it actually says the average speed limit in downtown Chicago is 11 miles an hour. which is 27% worse than the previous year. Number 3 is Paris. Number 4 is Boston. 5 is Bogota. 6, Palermo. 7, Toronto. 8, New York City. 9, Monterey. And 10, Philadelphia. So, what do you know? No LA in there whatsoever. And New York City is all the way down at number 8. And that's in the world, by the way. Now, here's an interesting statistic. They say in Chicago, the traffic congestion cost each driver over $2,600, and it cost the city $9.5 billion in 2022 alone. Figure that into your wages, people who live in big cities and think you're getting paid a lot of money to commute. Yeah, you're losing over $2,600 just sitting in traffic. Not cool. So another thing this NREX does is rank the worst traffic corridors in the U.S. Now, these didn't surprise me that much. Number 1 is Stamford, Connecticut. That's Interstate 95's southbound. And guess what? They're number 3 also, Interstate 95 northbound. Even more bizarre, number 7 and number 8 are both Stamford, Connecticut. That's State Route 15 and Merritt Parkway. So these are all locations just north of New York City on I-95. And if you've ever traveled up that corridor, it is a freaking mess, and it's always bad. Lots and lots of traffic. Yeah, not good. Just stay off 95 if you don't want to be pissed off. Number 2 is Los Angeles. Finally, it gets in there. Interstate 5 southbound is number 2. Number 4 is Boston, Interstate 93 southbound. New York City comes in at number 5, but that's Interstate 278 westbound. I figured it would be 95 running through town, but apparently not. Then we got number 6 at Concord, California. Number 9 is Chicago, Interstate 55 southbound. Yeah, I'm guessing an evening rush hour. That's a really bad road. And number 10 is Orlando, Interstate 4 eastbound. I've experienced some Orlando rush hour, but not much fun. So there you have it. If you want the complete list of everything on here, which there's more, head on over to landline.media. Just kind of a fun little article there. Now this last one I'm doing for the sake of equality. And thanks to Trevor Dunkel, who goes by the name Kool-Aid in the Trucker Dump Slack group, he pointed this out to me. Remember in the last episode that we talked about how you could be the next driver of the Wienermobile? Well, here's an article on WPXI.com. Planters looks for someone to drive Mr. Peanut, the Nutmobile, across the country. Yep, you guessed it, this one looks like a giant nut. So again, they're looking for a lot of the same type of things. You know, they're looking for a college graduate with a bachelor's degree, preferably in communications marketing, advertising, public relations, or a related field. You want to have the desire to travel and represent Planters Peanuts in all of that fun stuff. And they also say it's best if you have a proficiency for nut puns. So there's that. If you want to submit your resume, your cover letter, and a short video, why you'd be perfect. You aren't going to want to get on that by February 14th. And if you become the next Nutmobile driver, I expect some live reporting from the road, okay? Thanks to Trevor for sending this in. Oh, wow. That's kind of ironic, one right after the other, huh? Well, that is going to do it for the news, but we do have a little bit of listener feedback.
Hey, yo, bud, where do you want this load of feedback?
Okay, now I know I told you that we'd be hearing about One of a Kind's breakdown saga in this episode, and she actually got that all recorded up for me, and I totally dropped the friggin' ball. Yeah, she did not have a way to get this large audio file to me, and I told her I would send her a link to get it to me, and I completely forgot, and she went off to somewhere tropical for a vacation, and I just forgot to, I just dropped the ball on that one. So we will not be hearing from One of a Kind this time, but next episode, we'll get her breakdown saga on that one. But for now, we do have Charles. He wrote in and said, "Hey, I just found your podcast, been binge listening. I'm only on episode 110. I just heard Coping with New Drivers." I'll put a link to that in the show notes. He says, "I've been around trucks my whole life and driving for 5 years, mechanic for 40 years. I help only to keep drivers from hitting things, never give directions. I only yell when close to hitting something. Love the podcast for long drives." Charles. Well, thank you, Charles. I appreciate that. You know, I've heard that advice been given before, that you don't want to tell drivers which way to turn and stuff like that, because if they turn wrong and hit something, they're going to blame you. But if you just stand back there and act like a giant horn that's going off, when they get close to something, that is one way to do it. But either way, you are being a help. So thank you for helping all of these years out here. Boy, new drivers, they need all the help they can get. So like I said, I'll put a link to that episode 110 in there if you want to figure out how to deal with new drivers out on the road. In short, help and don't be a schmuck. Okay. Next up, we're going to hear from Cici. Oh boy, Cici. I ask for emails every single episode. I say, I want your listener feedback. Write in, tell me whatever you want to tell me, and I'll be happy to read it and possibly read it on the show. And, well, Cici did not disappoint. I gotta tell you, boy, she sent me a mammoth. I mean, this is a huge email. I actually couldn't believe how long it was. And I put, I actually have a word count thing on my computer, and I put it in there. 3,032 words. Just to give you an idea, back when I would write these long articles, they were often about 2,500 or 2,600 words. So this is a whopper of an email, and I love it. I got to tell you, I love it. I've read it. I enjoyed it, but I'm going to split it into smaller parts, and we're going to hear from Cici for the next 3 or 4 episodes. And hopefully I'm trying to get her to record some of these herself in her own voice. So that ought to be fun if I can talk her into it. So that's all of your assignments for this next week. Send me an email telling Cici how much you want her to read her own emails. Okay? And I'll read them all, and we'll just guilt her into doing it. She writes, "Hi, Todd. This is Cici from the Slack group, and yes, I am a woman. You weren't sure when I signed up." No, I wasn't, Cici. I like that on the internet. No one knows your gender unless you want them to. Good point. As you already know, I'm a brand new truck driver. Very brand new, coming up on only a month of driving by myself after finishing training. Yeah, that's pretty raw there, Cici. She says, I am still getting used to how to do everything, but I'm extremely lucky since I'm a rookie driver on a very regional dedicated account that has me home for a full 2 days every week. And it pays nicely to boot. Wow, cool. Says, so I get to skip a lot of the headaches I hear on your podcast that over-the-road drivers usually deal with. Yeah, parking. Boy, that's the big one right now. She says, for the most part, I get a reefer load at our DC. I deliver it 2 or 3 stores overnight and then take the empty back to the same DC, rinse and repeat for the next 5 days. Sometimes I have to stop at a truck stop if I run out of hours or get tired. But since I drive at night, I can always find parking when I'm done in the morning. Yeah, night driver. Love it. See, there are benefits of driving nights. You can always find parking. She goes on, not everyone is a nighttime driver here, but I personally like driving at night and it pays an extra premium, so I'll take it. Yep. Occasionally, our drivers will have to pick up backhauls at other locations and bring them back to the DC, but they haven't given me one of those loads yet. Although I've heard other than waiting to be loaded, all live loads and unloads because of reefers, those trips aren't that bad either, usually. We only go to 3 states, so the veteran drivers know the area and the stops very well, and are an excellent resource for us new drivers on the account. I'm happy to report that the experienced drivers here are very willing to help us newbies and will even explain the best way to get to a store and approach a dock if you hang out in our driver break room and tell them you've never been to a certain store before. I've also been told you can request to ride along with one of the mentor drivers before going to a particular difficult store so you can see what to expect before getting into the weeds by yourself. Cool. Don't want to set up unrealistic expectations for other new or prospective drivers here, but I did want to explain my experience a little to emphasize that people new to the trucking industry shouldn't feel obligated to only do OTR or accept bad pay rates. Look around and see what is out there. Even the big mega companies can have very good dedicated or regional accounts that require little or no experience. And I'm going to stop right there for now. Excellent points, Cici. When people think of truck drivers, they often think of you're going to be out on the road for weeks at a time, and that's just not the case anymore, especially if you are willing to take a little less money. Now, you say your job pays really well. I'm sure it does. I'm guessing it probably doesn't pay as much as other types of over-the-road driving, but you never know. Take, for instance, Trevor Dunkel, who, we talked about a little bit ago. He got into a job. He started with Schneider, worked for them for about a year, and then he found a local job that made more money than I was making at the job I had at the time, and I had been driving for 22 years at the time. And he found a job making more, and he was home every night. So it just depends. You just have to look around. Like Cici says, and like Trevor said, just keep looking until you find that job. They're out there. You just got to go find them. Seriously, the big mega carriers will be all over you. If you even show any interest in them whatsoever, you're going to get emails out the wazoo. You're going to get phone calls. You're going to get texts, probably if you're stupid enough to give them your phone number. But these good companies that pay really, really well, they're not out there seeking you out. They expect you to go find them. So, excellent advice, Cici, from a brand new trucker, no less. Thank you. And we'll be hearing from you in future episodes. Hopefully, your own voice. Man, I could be a mom with the guilt I'm laying on here. All right. Well, that is going to do it for the show. As of yet, there are still no sponsors to plug. I did sign up for that Blue Parrot affiliate account, which would help a little bit, but I haven't gotten confirmation that thing is completely set up yet. Boy, that was a pain in the butt to set that thing up too. They wanted to know everything, including my firstborn child, which I don't have one. So that was a problem. But anyway, there's that. And of course, driver Chris Mack was in the last episode talked about how he couldn't find the affiliate link for my Amazon and all that stuff. And I pointed out that it's in the show notes. It will be there again. I am going to make a special page on the website so I can just point you to that. It is not done yet, and it probably won't be done this week because Well, it is now 5:07 p.m. and they're probably going to call me for work here in about 4 hours. So I still got to take a shower. Good grief. All right. I guess we'll just end the show. And as my coworker says, go to bed, go to bed, go to bed, go to bed. All right. Night all. Okay, this time around I'd like to talk about something I kind of brush over at the end of every episode. I always say, thanks for listening and following the podcast. Well, I know you're listening because, well, duh. But are you following it? What I mean is, do you have your podcast app set to automatically notify you when a new show comes out? If not, please consider doing so. The button will either say subscribe or follow. Either way, it's totally free, which is my kind of price. So please get right on that. And while you're at it, lie to your friends, colleagues, and coworkers about how awesome the show is. Thanks in advance. And of course, thanks for listening. So until next time, drive safe and stay out of my way. Now here's an interesting statistic. And for some good news, there's at least one source that says the worst of this inflation mess is. And for some good news, there's at least one source that says the worst of this inflation mess is behind us. Messed.